I think the role of a curator and also like of a curatorial ecosystem is also to bring up conversations, bring up like new ways of doing things, maybe talk about the actual work and understand, oh, maybe we could do it this way, or maybe we could like work on this kind of like areas that you haven't explored yet. And actually some of the best projects that I think we've worked on this way with artists, some of the projects that we worked on this way with artists have ended up being some of the best projects that the artists have done.
Hello, Micol. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Good. So good to have you here.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Where are you right now, Micol? I know you've been traveling.
Yes, a little bit. It's been a busy September. I'm actually in London, so I'm home,
Okay,
which is great. It's
London.
actually Frieze week this week, so it's there's a lot going on. There's a lot of events and things happening across the week, so it's good to be here.
Nice. I've never been to Freeze. How does it work? Is it like a main event and then side events, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's an art fair, so like very similar to your kind of like your Art Basel type. They do them in different cities, exactly like Art Basel. Um, and actually, it started in London, I believe. So like
Okay.
London is the kind of like the core city for it. It's a 4-day, 5-day. It starts on Wednesday and then goes until Sunday. And then, as always, like the first couple of days are kind of like, preview, and then it opens up to, audiences, public. And yeah, it's in Regent's Park. So it's like a beautiful location in the middle of the park.
Mm,
And there's a lot going on in terms of like other events that are happening across. So all of the galleries in London kind of like do an opening or a show or something for it. And then obviously now that digital art scene is also quite prominent, there's quite a lot going on. Yeah, throughout the week. There's I have events every night basically from tomorrow onwards. So
nice.
it'll be busy. Yeah.
So that's great. I was gonna ask you like how much like digital art stuff is showcased, and what have you seen from from collectors and people that are their galleries? Are they excited about it and more open, like from the past compared to the past? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think to be completely honest and frank, within these bigger art fairs, there is still very little that is digital.
Hmm.
And even I would say, kind of like comparing, like digital with kind of like minted, like
Yeah,
NFTs on the blockchain, let's say, even less.
yeah.
I think we had a good start, during 2021 and maybe a bit of last year as well, where obviously like Tezos was partnering with Art Basel. So we had quite a lot of like digital art on the blockchain that was being shown and minted and proposed. But I think as the kind of I think as the money left, as the bull market
Hmm.
left, there's been a bit less interest in these bigger art fairs in either showcasing or actually like inviting these like ecosystems into their fairs. But realistically, like that doesn't mean that galleries are not interested, because independently, galleries in London and actually I think across the world are more and more um, looking into digital art, and specifically like art minted on the blockchain, and
Hmm.
how they can kind of like, in a way that feels, I think, more native and natural to them, how they can explore this ecosystem. I think
Hmm.
probably one of the biggest barriers, I don't even think it's you know galleries not wanting to adopt it or kind of like understand it or welcome it. It's just not knowing how,
Hmm.
and not having even maybe working with the right artists that they're representing, that are able to kind of produce or create work that is digitally native or can be digitally composed or can be on the blockchain.
Right.
And that's fair, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah, it's I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of complex um, to integrate blockchain right into a gallery, and where should they start? With, probably with some artists, but then most of them have their own group of collectors, right? And they aren't really like into blockchain, most of them probably. So it's like attacking or trying to gather a new audience, right? For those traditional galleries, especially in London. Um, and in your case, like your participation during this week, Micol, so is it like they invited you and usually is related to the digital space and kind of to go into conversations about blockchain art, or is it more like discussions about traditional art?
So my participation, we are not do as Vertical. We're not doing anything specific this week. We actually have one event in partnership with Lens and Familiar on Saturday, which is very kind of like digitally like focused, which we're very excited about. We're actually powering all of their live minting for Lens and Familiar. In terms of Frieze, like, or even in the past, if I kind of like think about, the art basels that I participated in the past, it was very much around like topics and discussions, so talks.
Mhm.
Um, I haven't had, un- unless like, kind of like in smaller percentages, the opportunity to be able to, curate anything for these bigger art fairs or anything like that. But I think like realistically, it's always good to be aware of what is going on within the wider kind of like art ecosystem. Um, People are also very interested in asking questions. I have, a lot of people that I know here in London that are either, gallerists or curators or collectors, even from kind of like my past, let's say, life. And yeah, they also like want to understand more, and so it's a good balance between also like understanding where the contemporary arts like ecosystem is right now, and how it's kind of like possible to, I don't want to say fit in, because I don't think it's the right word. I don't think we need to like digital art doesn't need to fit in any way, but understand also like, and people meet them where they are essentially. And I
Mhm.
think like a big focus for us in anything that we do, all of the events, the exhibitions, is to be very much of a bridge and like speak to the contemporary art like ecosystem in a way that doesn't feel scary, doesn't actually really relate to even crypto or NFTs that much. If you go back even to the very kind of like beginning, we have rarely really mentioned the word NFT in a lot of the events and exhibitions that we do, and right now even less so. um, so it's a lot of what we do, and our focus is always trying to kind of like create an ecosystem where people feel welcome, and when people feel included, even though maybe they don't know what exactly it is that we are showing in terms of like art or artists, but at the same time that they have a space where they can learn. So we're obvious, as you know, like we're very big on hosting like talks,
Yeah.
and the education part is such a core like way for us to curate as well, and to integrate like new people into what we're doing. And I think like from the past, especially here in London, from kind of proof of people but onwards to a lot of the events that we've hosted, we always see that there's a really good balance between people that are from kind of like digital art and NFT and crypto community of London, which is huge, but at the same time just new people, like new interested
Yeah.
artists, collectors, or curators, or just curious,
Mm.
who want to learn more, and that's super important for us. And it's I think how we kind of like make this space a little less scary,
Mhm.
and a little less of a closed bubble as well.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of things. So first of all, I've been to Proof of People both in London and New York City. And yeah, I feel that I can take my friends that have no
Yeah.
idea about NFTs, right, or digital art, because it's a festival, and I think that's the purpose of it. And also, it has talks, but it's showcasing art and music. I think that's also a big part of it. So yeah, basically, I could take any of my friends, and they will have a good time. And as you said, the word NFT is not really there. Then, if you want to learn more, how do I collect this art? Then, of course, then okay, yeah, it's in the blockchain. and that's when the conversation starts. But it's not
Yeah.
like the main attraction. And but before talking about that, because I have some questions about proof of people. But you mentioned your past life before, I guess, before founding Vertical. So can you tell us a bit, Micol, what's your background? So how this the idea of Vertical started, and what were you doing before creating Vertical?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So first, I want to touch on what you mentioned around like proof of people, being kind of like open, and that's really like the goal, like since we started it last year in London, it was a way for us to be able to also allow people that have really no idea about this ecosystem at all to be in a space where they wanted to be, and where they would be um, kind of like feel welcome and have fun, even not knowing anything about live minting and digital art, and so we kind of like blended into this idea of essentially building a festival that on the back end has the blockchain as its main um like its main kind of like technology, but also like its main driver.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's fun, and people can interact with the work and the art in a way that is interactive, immersive, interesting, without really like knowing much about anything at all. And then obviously, there's an opportunity to do so if you want to. So the fact that you say that you can bring your friends, it's cool because that's a goal, and that's what we did as well. We brought our friends who are completely on other kind of like industries and have nothing to do with crypto or NFTs at all. So yeah. But what I was doing before Vertical, so I was actually working for Meta. So at the time it was called Facebook. I worked there for 5 years,
Okay.
and I was kind of like in a couple of roles. But the last 2-3 years that I spent there, I was actually working with creator partnerships. So I was essentially helping creators. So a lot of artists and kind of like influencers and people who had like big followings on Facebook and on Instagram, mainly on Instagram, to utilize the platforms in the best way possible. And with that, um, it kind of what started me thinking, about what is, the ethos of kind of like a company like that and a corporate like that, and how realistically, like creators had no independence at all into what they were doing, and they
Mm.
were very reliant on any changes and any type of um, centralized kind of like ecosystem where they had to adhere with certain rules, which changed every month or week because you're constantly kind of like almost slave of the algorithm, which we all are now in a way on Twitter. And I kind of realized that yeah, I was looking for a little bit more, and I was interested in expanding what I knew about creators and art and that side of things into yeah, like more of the independence side.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it was actually for a friend of ours of mine that I discovered crypto art. So it
Hmm.
was really through art that I came into like blockchain and all of this ecosystem. I had no previous background into finance at all. So I really discovered like Ethereum and Bitcoin by kind of learning about super rare and learning about known origin and Rarible and a lot of these very early players, um, and what was happening within this ecosystem and how a lot of artists were kind of being independent and creative and saying, I'm an artist and I don't care what anybody else says. And this kind of creation of this subculture of crypto art, which I thought was super cool and super interesting.
Oh, that's very interesting. When you mentioned Meta and Facebook, I guess at the time when you were working there, it was still called Facebook, right? So it wasn't
Yeah.
like this new big announcement about Meta. What do you think about that, Micol? Now that I mean, Facebook, you were there for many years, and with this new change, have you seen the new like the new experience, like the VR experience that like Zuckerberg and showing a podcast? Have you seen that? It's like super real, like the avatar, real avatars. Do you see? Have you thought like how can what we're doing can eventually become part of this VR virtual reality world? Do you see that happening anytime soon, or still a little bit far away?
So I've actually, to be honest, like not been very interested nor have wanted to even like explore and look into what Meta is doing. I was a bit kind of close-ish to the team that was supposedly going to launch NFTs on Instagram. So I knew some of the people that were working there and what they were doing. That team closed, like does no longer
Yeah,
exist. Um, in terms of like, but I've always, kind of like saw it as in a way like I I haven't really how can I say this? Like I don't really see how a company like that, unless it completely changes their ethos and what
mm,
they are, how they even monetize and how they make money, because 99% of every
ads.
single thing that Meta does is ads. So ultimately, like it would be so much of a shift and so much of a change that I don't even know if it's possible to ever align with what are the the, the areas of blockchain that are important.
Mm,
And um and so I've kind of not really in a way even interested myself that much unless it's somehow brought to me.
mhm,
In terms of like virtual reality, i I see myself very much as a person who needs and wants to create experiences, and I think you can see that with everything that we do,
yeah, yeah.
IRL. When we started Vertical, it was actually in COVID times, so obviously none of that was possible. And so we started we started doing exhibitions online in the, let's say, metaverse, and creating like online galleries and experiences that would somehow, in a way, bring people together, almost like in a format of an exhibition, with an opening and talks and a curatorial tour and like a music and a party. So we wanted to allow people to have that experience, even though, we were all at home. And I loved doing that, and I still enjoy doing that, and we actually do that quite a lot for a lot of the residency exhibitions that we host. But I think there's such a just a difference in everything, in the experience, in the way that you connect with people, in what conversations span out of being IRL.
Right.
And although I think there's some incredible applications for VR that we'll probably see very soon-ish, for me specifically, for us specifically, and what we do, I don't see us kind of like going that route or utilizing, if not what we've been doing so far and how we've kind of like, we work with the online and IRL in that way, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I agree with the what you mentioned about the ethos of a company like Meta. Right. It's very very different from the philosophy of blockchain. Right. And decentralization and ownership. Completely different. Like the opposite. Completely.
Yeah.
Um. But yeah, coming back to Vertical, which, by the way, is it Vertical Crypto or you are rebranding to Vertical? Is it a
Yeah, we
rebrand?
we rebranded. We quietly rebranded
I
a
like it. I
month or
like it.
so ago,
Yeah.
and we kind of lost. We decided to lose the crypto art
Hmm.
and have vertical. So yeah, that's us now.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Especially because everything related to crypto, right? NFTs, I think has a different connotation, right? Either about investments, NFTs. Yeah, well, you know very well. It's a complicated term, and makes sense to be named vertical. And what is vertical, Micol? How do you define it? I of course know what it is, but maybe some people in the audience, just to give some context, how do you usually define it? What do you tell your friends? What's vertical?
Well, it depends who I'm speaking to. I have different definitions for different people, but I think in general, how we like to call it and how we see ourselves, and kind of like what we do, is we say that we're like a house for art and culture on the blockchain. And really, that is a definition that has come in time, because something that I personally struggled with, and just in general, like almost like defining what we do, because we span across a lot of different cultural ecosystems. We have Vertical, which is a platform and which acts as a gallery, which acts as a curatorial studio. But at the same time, we don't only work with art. We actually work a lot with music. So we span into like the music ecosystem quite a lot. And at the same time, we also work like in fashion and kind of like the applications of digital fashion on the blockchain. So with that, it kind of like it's almost like the way that I see it. It's really like a cultural like ecosystem that basically wants to bridge what is happening right now within digital culture in the areas of art, music, and fashion into contemporary culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that in a variety of different ways. Obviously, the exhibitions and the events are a huge part of our like DNA. But a big part of our DNA is also education with the residency program, which is something that we launched and it's kind of stemmed out of the first year of Vertical as a company, the Vertical Residency, which is a online free residency that we have been running for over 2 years, and that welcomes in residents and artists and creators from all over the world who essentially have access to a curriculum and workshop of classes that run from around 6 to 12 weeks on an
Mm-hmm.
ongoing basis. And so like on one hand, we have this kind of like culture, club and house for art and culture is Vertical. We have the residency, which is education. And then from that, obviously, Proof of People is very much like in a way aligned with, these two areas, because we bring in one space and one place, which is a festival, everything that we do with like art, music, and fashion, and with education. So yeah, that's kind of
That's.
us.
I mean, it's pretty amazing how you started Vertical as an art house, but now it's basically not sure how to call them, but three sub companies. Maybe it's a good way to say. And in a very short amount of time because you started during COVID. So how like what advice would you give to those right that are creators to be in this space or in another space regarding this, Micol? How have you done this? Like created three things that are working very properly and very complicated, right? Because you are tackling different challenges, working with a lot of artists, a lot of logistics involved. So, what's your advice for those creators, founders out there in this space or in another space?
So I recently had I was recently hosting a workshop, doing a workshop for UAL, University of the Arts, London, um, who we kind of like partner and work with quite a bit, especially on the educational side of things. And the workshop was exactly about this, like how to the students who were there were actually they either finished their courses, so their degrees or masters, or they were about to, and so they had already like ideas of what they wanted to do. And I was kind of giving my perspective or my journey of what how Vertical started and where it's at now, and all of the different challenges and wins that we've faced across these 3 years or more actually now. um, for me, the biggest kind of way that we went about creating and building was very organically. And I know it's going to sound like super cheesy, but it really was. Like I never started thinking this was going to be a company. It actually started as a Twitter profile,
Mm-hmm.
very much my own exploration of the space and what I was looking into, what I was interested in. And then as things progressed, it kind of became, Vertical Crypto Art. And then it became a curatorial studio. And then we started an auction house. And then, we kind of evolved with that and became more of like a platform. And it was very much, it is really an exploration of
Mm-hmm.
like, and almost like a timeline of the cultural space on the blockchain. And it's never been, in a way like pushed towards something specific. It's really always been with the idea to keep like advocating and being, a voice for culture this culture, this digital culture, and how we can translate that into, let's say like the real world.
Okay.
And have fun in the process. Like everything that I do is because we want to do it, and we really enjoy it. And the things that we didn't do well were the ones that we didn't enjoy doing.
Okay.
And this sometimes you have, especially I think like as a company, as a founder, you especially with certain like if you're like funded and so on, you kind of like get these like revenue goals or ways that you should be kind of thinking about your business. And for us, we've always almost like avoided that, because it's allowed us to have a lot of independence. Of course, it comes with a lot of challenges. You don't have maybe like the same leadway and the same kind of like capital, but at the same time, like we've kind of learned so much by doing things and kind of like being able to support everything that we do with what we're doing, that it's been extremely fulfilling, very fulfilling. And yeah, like it's sometimes like people recently they ask me like, oh, how are you doing like in this bear market and so on and so forth. And it's like, for us, like the way that we see it, like it's a market, like there's no bull or bear. Like this is the market
That's
right
your
now.
reality,
This is it.
right? It's
This
the
is my reality.
Yeah.
When I started Vertical, yeah, it was like there were probably 50 people on Twitter. I didn't realize it was a bull or a bear. I didn't even know the words bull or bear, because I didn't know about crypto at all. So, for me, it's like, this is my ecosystem. This is my reality. Like whether, people are buying a lot or people are buying less or people are talking about it in a certain way or not, like we kind of keep doing what we're doing in the best way possible and having fun in the process, as I said before.
Yeah.
And I think it shows, I think like when, this kind of organic, real side of everything that we do, just kind of transcends into everything that we, hopefully transcends into everything that we do.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, especially when we are talking about art, right, and creation. Yeah, why do we use those terms, right? Beer or bull doesn't make much sense. And Nicole, when you say organic, so because I mean, it's what is that? Is it like when you let's say when you decided to create a proof of people, which was a very complex challenge, right? Running an event in London, finding a location, getting artists on board that travel to the event, and getting people to show up. So it's a very complicated challenge. So what was organic about that? You heard people telling, "Hey, we should do this IRL. I wish we could connect in real life. I want to see the art live." Or was it more like an idea that sounded, as you said, fun to do for the team? How did that like exactly happen?
Yeah, so it's a combination. So my co-founder, Phil, has a background in music industry, has been working in the music industry for forever before this, and in a way, like we've kind of been in between these two worlds, right? Like art and music. And I think like sometimes, especially, you kind of like think about, oh, the art industry and then the music industry and then the fashion industry. And I think like with blockchain and with NFTs and kind of like this culture, the good thing about it and what it really like excites me about it is that everything is kind of blended, and you don't really have these like very specific definitions. Like even if I think about art, like I was recently listening to Luke Shannon, who came into our residency to teach about generative embroidery. He's an artist, but he's doing fashion, like he's doing embroidery which can be applied into fashion. At the same time, like artists work with music artists work with visual artists all the time. Like that is their part of their practice. So we wanted to find a way that we could bring in people from our even like friend group and like ecosystem that had no idea about what we were doing, and constantly were asking us questions like, what it is that you're doing, we really don't get it, in a way that felt fun, curated, interactive, and playing with the technology that is blockchain. So really like blending into and trying to play into like this idea of, you know, site-specific installations and interactive works. And so obviously like that's, you know, if anybody came to Proof of People, it was, you know, quite visible with like Operator and, you know, our AR installations and Sutu. We had so much that people could playfully play with in a way that didn't have to do with, you know, NFT and crypto at all, but at the same time was powered by blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to do that in a space like Fabric, which is, you know, a music like
Yeah, a
nightclub. Yeah.
Underground kind of
That
vibe.
didn't feel scary for somebody who has like, you know, for example, like if I invite some people to, you know, certain like events or art galleries, are like, oh no, but like I don't want to go because, you know, it's an art gallery and I feel like I'm not part of that ecosystem and so on. Well, Fabric, you know, it's a nightclub, and the fact that it's during the day, it's already like, oh, you know, this is weird. Like, what is happening here? You know, it's open
Yeah.
during the day for an art conference with talks and some sort of music. So we kind of wanted to shift people's perspective and flip things around, and make it inclusive for the wider like young culture as well, like really like people who are, you know, doing art or playing music or probably want to be involved with this ecosystem and don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah,
And
no, that's very interesting. The idea of, as you said, fashion, art, and music, that those three disciplines are kind of blend in the blockchain. That's very interesting because I have seen, for example, some artists creating AI art, where their art is actually fashion, right? There is um like they are playing with the fashion, like futuristic fashion and
yeah.
different creations. So they sell it as art, right? So, and the same thing with music, right? It's like integrated. That's a very cool point. And yeah, coming back to Fabric, actually, so it's a funny story. I was there at the Proof of People London, and I have some cousins that live in London, and so I told them, yeah, I'm going for work um, to London. They say, "Oh, nice, cool." And then after some time, they were asking, "So where are you going?" And it was like 3 p.m. Uh, no, Thursday, I think Friday. And then, no, I'm going to Fabric. And the event is at Fabric, and they went, "What? That's a nightclub. What kind of job are you? What are you doing there?" But yeah, it's funny. It's a very interesting concept, and also in New York City, right? You were at Brooklyn. Was it
Yeah,
Brooklyn, and
zero space.
it
Yeah.
was a huge warehouse. It was also very interesting.
Yeah.
And so, Micol, what's the biggest challenge? Because I'm always very impressed by these events, right? I had Seth on the podcast from Bright Moments, and he was, you know, he's doing something similar, running galleries like events around the world. Um, so, what are the biggest challenges to run these events, in your opinion? What's the biggest challenge of running Proof of People?
So many. If you think about if I think about the first one and even the second one, you know, in New York, like it's I think like, well, me personally, I always underestimate the production, you know, level that is needed for these events. And luckily, you know, I have a good team and people who actually like, you know, joined our team specifically also for the Proof of People like events. But I think like it's a combination. It's a combination of, because we also like we also do a lot. We do art, we do music. So we have a music programming, we have full talk panel programming, and you know, there's artists that you need to coordinate. There's a production that needs to happen. There's, you know, site specific installation. There's all of the tech integration. So there's a lot of challenges. I think like the biggest one is trying to make everything work
Mhm.
in a way that is feels good for you, for the artist, for the people who are participating. Because one thing that I'm like always not worried, but like I always think about is I want the artists to be happy of how we're showing their work. I want the installations to, you know, be the best that they can be for people to be able to like interact with them in the right way, but at the same time valuing and kind of like thinking about, you know, the artistic like direction of thought behind it. So it's always, you know, trying to find that balance. You know, I'm sure like Seth kind of like shared the same. It's really like a matter of like coordination and a lot of organization, a lot of patience, and just, you know, pushing
Yeah.
realistically, and trying your best.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
it's not easy. I'm not
yeah,
gonna lie.
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you're going through from London to New York City and throwing these 3 days. Usually they are 3 days, right? 3 days
Yeah,
event
usually 2 to 3
with.
days. Yeah.
And Micol, in terms of working with artists, so I mean, I have a couple of questions there, like the curation part. So, how does that work in a house like Vertical? Is it you have? Is it like a team staying on top of what's happening in blockchain art? Is it listening to people, listening to other artists? How does that happen? How do you actually you go ahead and talk to artists to participate, collaborate? How does that work?
Yeah. So our curation like process, or I would say like how we try to like stay on top of it is in a few different ways. I think for sure there's a lot of research that happens kind of like behind the scenes, mainly me, I would say. And with research, I think about you know, like, of course, you know, Twitter is a big like ecosystem, but also looking at actually like artists who are working with like you know, digital means on in other like ecosystems, on Instagram, on, you know, other galleries that don't even do NFTs, you know, other kind of like research of that sort. A big part of obviously the way that also and that allows us to curate, I think in kind of like a more like open and inclusive way, is also our residency program. Like
Mm,
every 12 weeks we welcome 25 new residents, and you know, these residents are extremely talented. And so through them, I also discover, like through that, I also discover a great amount of like new talent that I possibly would not really be able to unless we had, you know, this ecosystem. And actually, through these other artists, it's kind of like a ball that rolls, because I then kind of find out about, you know, their ecosystem and their network and their artists that they shape and that they, you know, value. Another big part is collaborations. You know, we collaborate with a lot of like different galleries, curators, institutions. Recently, we just closed, you know, our exhibition and sale of FemGen. We collaborate with Right Big Save, and so obviously Alex Estorick, who is the editor in chief at Right Big Save, we work on these together, and we kind of like share ideas of these of artists and how to curate together. So, and we've worked with Anika Meier in the past. You know, we worked with a lot of different like people from the ecosystem as well. And then I think like one thing that for me is, and for us is like super important always, and I think we've kind of done it throughout all of the events and exhibitions that we do, is that we want to find a balance between working with artists that we have historically, you know, worked with and have relationships with, and obviously like value and maybe are established, but at the same time bring in new talent and bring in new artists every time. So
mm,
for example, like recently, you know, we had the FemGen sale, and actually like I was actually talking to a lot of like different collectors about it, and one of the artists that a lot of the artists, like especially Emi Kusano and Kaoru Tanaka, who are artists from Japan, a lot of collectors from our network and our ecosystem had no idea who they were,
mm,
and discovered, you know, new talent through a lot of these exhibitions. And I think like that for me is when it's a win. You know, it's a
yeah.
really big win when we manage to curate shows that are, you know, thought provoking and like discourse provoking, mentally provoking, but also that allow to kind of like expand a little bit our ways of like who we see and who we collect from and who are the artists that we should be looking at.
Hmm.
And um, I think it's kind of like a big problem in this ecosystem.
Hmm.
Exactly this for sure, discovery is a huge problem for everybody, collectors, curators, everyone. But I also think it's also about like there's very little risk taking. You know, it's everybody I don't want to say everybody, but people like to play it safe. With artists that they curate, with artists that they collect, with things that get talked about. It's even though we think we're kind of like very underground and with subcultures, and so it's actually very safe. Especially on I think on curatorial frameworks, and so we like to not do that and not play into that, and find a balance between obviously working with artists that we truly value and have long-standing relationships with. I can think about like Klingemann and Helena Sarin, who I've known since almost day one of Vertical Crypto, but at the same time constantly try and funnel in and discover and bring in new perspectives and new talent and new artistry and new ways of seeing this ecosystem,
right?
And in the process educating other people to do the same.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very, I mean, of course, discovery is a problem for different reasons, right? As you said, people want to play it safe, but at the same time, the way how artists, like their tools to showcase their art is Twitter, basically. And it's a numbers game. And if you are kind of new to the space, you don't have a big audience, how do you get visibility, right? So it's very important what you're doing there, showcasing artists. I really like that idea. And Nicole, how's that process? Like, you have worked with how many artists have you worked with? It should be
Many.
like 300, 500 artists probably or more.
Probably around that 300 mark, I would say, if not
And
more. Yeah.
how do you do that? Like, how is it to work with artists, as you mentioned, the music, fashion, arts industry? Like, is there something particular about them that you notice during your interactions? How do you actually reach out to them? How is that interaction? How is it to work with somebody creating digital art every day? Anything comes to mind?
So the way that I reach out is like I to be honest, I try all like ways. Sometimes, and many of the times, it's via Twitter. A lot of the times, actually, for some artists, it's also using Instagram. Especially artists who maybe are not on Twitter or like don't use it that much or not even in this ecosystem. Instagram is a huge channel for me, and I try to be as kind of how I started doing when we started Vertical as a Twitter account, just try to be as sincere and honest as possible. Hey,
Right.
I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm doing this and this, or I'd like to know more. I'd like to have a conversation. I usually like to kind of say why I'm reaching out, because people are they want to know. When somebody reaches out to me, I want to know why they're reaching out.
Right.
And then from there it's a conversation. Like we have a call, we start to have a conversation, and understand what's their process, what's their practice, what they're working on. And from there it's either I already have a curatorial kind of like theme or framework that I'm working on, and see whether it can be applied to what we're doing, or we kind of like keep the conversations for the future and for other exhibitions and other events and other places and ecosystems that we're doing something. So it's a mix. Then from there it's I mean, I think everybody has their own ways. I'm I would say I pride myself to be very organized, and so I try to be as be as organized as possible for the artists that work with us, and be super clear with deadlines and kind of like what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're gonna promote it and market it and what we're gonna say and what we need from them. So it's now become, obviously, having done this for over 3 years, you become
More fluent.
more
You
fluent.
yeah, you get.
At the same time, working with artists, I'm not gonna lie, like it's as interesting as it is tough. And you're working with like creative mindsets and creative people, and there's a lot of like changing of minds and changing of perspectives and kind of like shifting to maybe like doing other work. I think like I think I see a lot of the artists that we work with more as I don't want to say friends, because maybe it's going to sound kind of like cliche, but I do see it as a conversation, and like a lot of the times the more it's seen more as like a partnership and like a constant conversation, the less it feels like like a business transaction, right? Like um, I don't want this, what I'm
Right.
doing for my side or for the other side to feel like a transaction. Like I am, getting your work and you're getting this back. Like I think the role of a curator and also like of a, curatorial ecosystem is also to bring up conversations, bring up like new ways of doing things, maybe, talk about the actual work and understand, oh, maybe we could do it this way, or maybe we could like work on this kind of like areas that you haven't explored yet. And actually, some of the best projects that I think we've worked on this way with artists, some of the projects that we worked on this way with artists have ended up being some of the best projects that the artists have done. And
Mm.
with feedback that they've, told me directly, like, actually, thank you for telling me this, or thank you for pushing me to explore this, because it's allowed me to see things in a certain way. And actually, the project has now become XYZ because of it. So I think like, for me, it's sometimes like it feels a bit scary to
Mm.
actually like tell someone, hey, why don't we try this? Or like, especially an artist who, it's their work, they know what they're doing. But it's not really you telling them how to do things. It's just kind of like having a conversation and exploring ways in which maybe it could be enhanced and
Right.
expanded.
Yeah, and especially since you have so much experience, right? You're working with many artists in different setups, right? As you said, auctions to be, releases to be, big collections. And how often, like when you interact with artists and they ask you and they ask for your feedback, how often is it related to art, and how often is it related to pricing, supply, all this like strategy that many artists hate and many people hate? So is it like 50-50, or actually they ask for a lot of advice in terms of the pricing, the market, how should they do it? What's the
I wish it was 50-50, but it's not. Completely honestly, it's probably 80-20.
Mhm.
80 is a lot about pricing and kind of like the market, and even just like, even if it's not about pricing, it's about strategy of how to do the release, or how it would look like. And in a way, like, I think it's actually like the role of, let's say, a curator is also this within this ecosystem,
Mhm.
because it is strictly tied to the market ecosystem. And part of, being, doing what we do, is to enable, these conversations and to help artists in this process to understand certain things. Because sometimes, like, we look at like, we look at releases, we look at drops, we look at what other galleries are doing and other ecosystems doing very much on a daily basis. And artists don't do that.
Don't
They
have the
focus on,
time.
yeah, they focus on their work, and rightly so, they should do.
Mhm.
So it's part of, our role to be able to actually give perspective on
Yeah.
what we think might be, the best way forward. But I have to say, like, sometimes actually, like for me, it kind of starts. So the art kind of comes first. So like, even when I'm talking to artists, it's, we talk about the project or the release or the work first, and then, the second kind of like part to it is we talk about, so there's always in some shape or form a conversation about the art that happens,
Right.
whether it's very light touch and, I'm just saying like, this is amazing, it looks great, or whether it's kind of like more going into details and talking a little bit more, and maybe like figuring out things and areas that, we want to change or shift or like explore. There's always that part first, and then it's kind of like the, you know the
Yeah.
the, the
Yeah.
market
The
strategy, let's say.
Yeah, the strategy and general advice, Micol, from, I mean, in terms of strategy, like supply, like managing their their drops, their releases, um, the blockchains. I mean, there is so much, right? All the marketplaces, how to showcase their art, how to handle conversations with collectors and other artists, collaboration. So anything that you think it's very important and many artists aren't looking at or aren't doing in the right way, anything like, like low hanging fruits for artists when it comes to strategy in terms of their career, managing their drops?
Yeah, I would say that I think sometimes, one thing that I kind of touch on as well, especially also for like the residency artists and, artists who are kind of trying to establish their audience and their network and their collector base, is to try to think about not only kind of like the final sale price and what you will get for that specific work or for that specific project, but also the opportunity that you have to be able to increase or kind of like interact with a new pool of people, collectors, audience. And I think like sometimes there's a big focus on this, the sale, like what it would sell for, and maybe a little less focus on who I can reach with this work and how I can reach them, and through this work I can be in the hands or be in the know of XYZ people.
Right.
And I think like especially with blockchain, like one of the biggest plus sides to it is the distribution. Like the way that you can distribute your work is so unique to this technology that I think it's super important to like consider that as an artist, as somebody who's kind of crafting their way into the space.
Mm-hmm.
And so one advice would definitely be that. And then another, which kind of like, it's sometimes a hit and miss, but it's I think like there's a big focus on this selling out factor.
Mm.
And whilst it is obviously everybody wants to sell out, that's the goal. But at the same time, it's very unprecedented, like even within like art history or like in galleries, like that doesn't really happen. And sometimes there's this immediate not selling out equals my work
Failure.
is not good enough.
Yeah.
And I've had numerous conversations about this, and it's not true. Like the reality is that it's not true. So I think the taking away this association that artists have of I sold out, my work is great, I didn't sell out, my work is terrible, is super important.
Yeah.
And of course, as a gallery, as a curator, you want to do your best to be able to, get the best results for it. And sometimes it takes more time, sometimes it's about a month or a week or 3 months. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think these two things I would probably.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And yeah, I like to think about selling out. Would you compare it to concerts or events, sports events? Big artists, like super popular artists, they go on tours, and many times they don't sell out their concerts. And same for franchises. I don't know, baseball, football, many games aren't sold out. So if you think about that, and then you are an artist in the blockchain, which is 2-3 years since it became really popular, it's very, as you said, unprecedented to be thinking about selling out all your drops. It's basically impossible. And I think in general, what's happening these days is good for that, right? Like people aren't expecting that as they were expecting it 1 or 2 years ago. Collectors, artists, so there is more freedom, I think, to explore with collection sizes, pricing, and there is less pressure. I feel a little bit less pressure in general in the environment to sell out. But yeah, it's a big thing. And Nicole, we have been chatting for almost an hour now. We're getting to the end. Um, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on what are you excited about these days in terms of digital art, the space, what you are seeing with Vertical, with artists, with collectors. Anything in particular that you feel excited about today?
I'm actually I was on what you just mentioned around this kind of like this market right now. Like I am very excited about where we are right now. I
Mm-hmm.
think I've never seen, or actually it in a way I've seen it at the very beginning when we started, and we're talking about early 2020, so a while ago. artists experimenting and focusing on trying and creating as much as I have now. And this is super exciting. And it brings a lot of innovation, and it brings a lot of like new perspectives to what this ecosystem can do, to what art on the blockchain and culture on the blockchain is. For example, I mean, of course, like a very artist that I truly admire and work with a lot are Operator, but at the same time, I think like artists like made by Oona, who is exploring performance art on the blockchain. Like there's so many really interesting areas that are being explored that kind of tie into art and culture and tech, and how that can be enhanced. All three can be enhanced together. That I'm looking forward to being able to kind of like integrate that into a lot of what we do, which to a certain extent we've already done, and we continue to do so. But keep seeing these new ways of kind of like creating and experimenting. And I think like we kind of are a result of the artists that we work with, and like the great work that they do. And so seeing this moment for artists to be able to really experiment means that it'll just get more interesting for me and for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I'm very excited about. Yeah, I think mainly this. Of course, there's a lot of things that we're doing, that we're up to. We have a few things that are coming up. But I think like overall, if I have to say, overarching what I'm excited about, this is it.
Yeah. And Nicole, when you say experimenting, so is it on new techniques for their art, or a new vision, like in artistic forms, or is it more like what you said in the tech side, like with the new mechanics and exploring smart contracts and interactions, and is it like a sum of all that, or what do you see like the experimentations you are seeing these days? Is it more towards the art, or the distribution, engagement, and blockchain usage?
I think it's both. And actually, what I was referring to in terms of excited about is the first.
Mm-hmm.
So really like this idea of taking, each one's practice or the artist's practice into this medium and exploring ways in which it can be enhanced.
Okay.
Which it can be through technology as well. It can be through smart contracts. It can be through, but it's kind of like this conversation between like art and tech in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of on the other side, what the second part that you were mentioning around smart contracts and dynamic NFTs and so on. There's so many incredible kind of like companies and an ecosystem that are helping and nurturing and kind of providing all of these tools for artists. I think about Manifold or Transient Labs and so many, and that's great. But I think like ultimately it kind of all goes back to how to build that artistry within with this technology. And I think the best, I in my opinion at least, examples and kind of ideas and art projects that I've seen are when there's art first, and that is then kind of creates the conversation with technology.
Right, when the technology side is kind of an adaptation of the art, of the
Yeah,
message.
and you can build technology on top of the art, like especially now with everything that we can do with smart contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think like art and then tech.
Right.
For me, at
Yeah,
least.
no, that's very interesting. So for me, I will say I come more from the tech side, right? So I was a software developer, data scientist. So I was really into smart contracts. That's how I got into the ecosystem. But then art was like a very new field for me. So like a blue ocean to explore. And then when you combine that with generative art, it was like the perfect mix for me at least. But I agree. I think the art needs to be first. Otherwise, it's just like building software, an app, an application. So it's very different. Um, Micol, last question, and this is could be a tough one depending how you see it.
Oh no.
I asked this to all the guests. So three artists that that inspire you to be any level. Ideally, digital artists, working with the blockchain, emerging, starting out, or established free artists, yeah, that you enjoy, are inspired by?
Operator, for sure. I think, like, and to give a bit of a context and backstory, I worked together and I've met Anya and Dija
Yeah,
almost 2 years ago.
I met them. I met them recently in Lisbon. We had a dinner together. Very nice conversation, and they are living in Spain,
Yeah, they're in
Madrid.
Madrid now,
Yeah,
and yeah, we worked on a few different projects together, and I think they're the way that they really see their practice, and how they approach. We did their, so we showed them in February of 2021, the first IRL exhibition that we did in Los Angeles during Frieze LA, actually. And from there, we kind of, started this ongoing conversation and friendship and kind of like a relationship, obviously with, privacy portraits, a proof of people, with the unknown sitter after that, and more things coming. And I think it's been one of these like artist duo that constantly questions and kind of like pushes themselves to think differently and to have a meaning in everything that they do, like an actual real substantial meaning of their work. And so I think I'm super happy that they got the recognition that I think everybody knew that they deserved with the art blocks drop that they recently did. But yeah, like I think one definitely top artist that I look up to. And I already mentioned her, but I think Oona, she was part of our residency. She's an alumni. I think she's doing some really interesting and thought-provoking work with performance art, and tying that into blockchain, and it's actually leading the way and giving a lot of examples to how to do that for other performance artists. And in the process, she's also like bringing in and kind of like leveling up and bringing in a lot of other artists. So yeah, super interested in what she's doing and her work. We did something together during VCA Invites London last year in November. Again, blending in like performance art with this idea of like anonymity and kind of surveillance, which are key factors and key areas that she explores in her practice. And the last one, who is like somebody that I'm very, very close to and I've known since the early days, is Linda Dounia.
Okay.
Again, part of our first ever residency that we did. Incredible artist, so diverse in all of her practice. I think I've never met somebody that has so many tools and can do so much with whether it's like digital or physical or AI. Like she's I would say like how can you say it, like chameleontic in a way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice.
And yeah, so those three.
Oh, fantastic.
But I mean, like, it's a really hard question. Like,
Yeah.
I always try to avoid this, but
Yeah, I have one chance to ask this and put the guest in a tough spot, but I think it's very interesting to hear from people like you that are immersed right in this space and hear the reasons why you like those artists. So Micol, I know it's been a great conversation. Thanks so much. It
thank
was
you.
great to learn more about Vertical and everything you're doing, and hope to have you as a guest in the future, and hope to be a proof of people again soon. When is the next one, by the way?
So we just announced last week that we're gonna do it in 2024 springtime. We're gonna be kind of like choosing exactly the dates and announcing it very soon, but definitely before the end of the year.
Okay.
But looking around springtime next year.
Awesome.
In London at Fabric.
London. All right. Amazing. Thanks so much, Micol.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.